Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Sheldon. Marel Diak Taipia.
Thank you, Meryl, dear. Good morning, and welcome to, thank you for joining us for Trialogue's January webinar, our first one of 2025. It's great to see everyone coming in. Just get this over here. Thank you very much. We'll just allowing some time for everyone to join in. So thank you very much for joining us this morning. We see a lot more people coming in. We had record registration, so I'll just give some time for more of our attendees to hop online for us. But as I said, this is our first webinar of 2025. We host these online forums monthly on the last Thursday of the month. So mark it on your calendars. And today we're exploring a critical topic that fits in with the theme of new beginnings. How businesses can use their CSI strategies and resources to scale access to quality ECD education for all children. I think that's really important. Coming in, let's see, oh, great. Those numbers have skyrocketed. Got 172 people having joined with us this morning. So we'll kick a good place to kick that off. Thank you very much. So as we begin today, I think it's really key, the topic that we are looking at today. As I'd mentioned, for those who've just joined us, we're looking at how businesses can use their CSI strategies and resources to scale access to quality ECD education for all children. Now, early childhood development is key both for the individual child and society. It's key for brain development, school readiness, breaking cycles of poverty, boosting social equity and economic development. Now, the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust, our partners in bringing you this webinar, quote Bill Gates in their education research report. And he's quoted as saying, "The first 5 years have so much to do with how the next 80 turn out." And that truly encapsulates what is at stake. Good quality ECD education can change lives, families, and generations. Now, I'm looking forward to today's discussion to explore some of the innovative ways companies, nonprofits, and other organizations can play their part to improve ECD education and scale access. Thanks again to the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust for supporting this webinar and continuously supporting thought leadership and capacity building. We appreciate their support. Just this week, it's been a busy week for them. They hosted a breakfast with Investec on ECD as well, where the Minister of Basic Education, Siviwe Gwarube, spoke as well as other speakers. So definitely one that they're putting a lot of effort and drive behind as we kick off the year. Now, thanks to our panelists for sharing their insights and time with us. And thanks to you, our audience, for joining us this morning. I also want to mention that we have extended our monthly webinars to 90 minutes after receiving feedback from you to allow for more time to delve into the really important topics we deal with each month. A few technical points before we kick off. There are 2 ways for you to engage on this call, and you're welcome to use the chat function to connect with fellow delegates and share your thoughts on the content. We also encourage you to ask questions through the session, and that I find is where the richness comes from, your questions that you pose to us. You can do this by using the Q&A function rather than the chat box. Just a note, the Q&A function. I will draw questions from that Q&A box for our panelists to respond to in the discussion section of the webinar. So please direct the question to one or more panelists and do keep it brief as possible. There's a short survey that will pop up at the end of the session. Please do share your thoughts here so that we can improve these sessions and focus on topics that are of particular interest to you. And then just finally, the session is being recorded and an article and recording will be made available to everyone who registered. Now, moving on to the agenda for today. After my brief introduction, I'll be handing over to each of our panelists for their opening comments, We'll then dive into the discussion, and our panelists will answer some of the questions from the Q&A box. Each panelist will then give a short closing comment. The first poll will appear on your screen. Now, we'd like to know which type of organization you represent. This will help our panelists and I shape the discussion so that we can tailor it for you and make it really effective in what we discuss and what we focus on. I'll leave that up for a minute. Great attendance, I must say. We've got 250 people on the line. I think that's one of our highest attendances yet. And I think it really just speaks to the importance of the topic and the commitment to ECD development in South Africa. So thank you, those votes coming in. Strong non-profit organization representation, around 66% as the votes stand. Big business, that's great, 10%. We're really looking for impact at scale. Small or medium businesses, 7%. Government, 1%. We've got consultants, academics, and others. So really nice mixed audience, which will allow us to tailor our discussion. So thank you for that poll there as we kick off the discussion. So we'll leave that up. We'll move on from that one. So thanks very much. Okay, if we just have a look at now, I just wanted to, I see a couple of familiar faces and names on the call. So thank you very much for that. And I also see that we've got a couple of new names, and I'd like to welcome you if you're a first timer. Please do allow me to take you through Trialogue and what we do to give you a better understanding of who we are and what we do as Trialogue. So Trialogue is one of the few consultancies in South Africa that focuses on responsible business. We do this through our consulting services as well as through our knowledge sharing platforms, all of which aim to make corporate social investment in South Africa more effective. Now, the two main types of consulting that we do are CSI strategy development and monitoring and evaluation. On our knowledge sharing platforms, we run an annual conference, our Business and Society Conference, which many of you would have heard about and attended. That will be held this year between 12 and 14 May. So mark those dates. You can find more information on the theme, venue, and pricing on the Trialogue website. Registration will open next month. And we also publish the Business and Society Handbook, which I hope many of you have opened with you as you page through it and hone your strategies for the year ahead. We invite companies and nonprofits to profile their development work in this premier research-based CSI publication. If you haven't got your hands on the 2024 publication, you'll see the beautiful cover there on the presentation screen. This was released in December, the 2024 edition. That's our 27th edition. You can order yours on the Trialogue website or contact us directly. And then our third leading platform is the Trialogue Knowledge Hub, an online body of knowledge that unpacks specific topics in development and is aimed at strengthening the impact of investment in those areas. Through the Knowledge Hub, corporates showcase the important and industry-leading social impact work they do and support for knowledge sharing and capacity building as well. And then just finally, just a reminder that a write-up and the recording of this webinar will be uploaded to the Trialogue Knowledge Hub. So please, if you find it valuable today, that the discussions we have, please share that with your colleagues, peers, and others in the industry. So now I want to turn our attention to the South African context when it comes to ECD. We're going to put the second poll up now, which speaks to today's topic. How should CSI balance short-term visible outcomes with long-term systemic changes? So we'll put that poll up. I'll leave it up for a bit as you give us your thoughts, share your thoughts with us, and then understand the context that we're in. Okay. Those votes coming in, thank you so much. I just want to let you know that the attendance has continues to increase. So welcome if you've just joined us. You haven't missed much. We're now at around 280 people. That's fantastic. We hope to have a rich discussion today. If we look at the poll, setting up new and early learning programs to ensure access at around 10%, infrastructure development, which I think goes to the heart of the discussion today, and we'll hear more about initiatives such as the Banapele initiative from the Department of Basic Education, that registration drive. We've got training and upskilling ECD practitioners. Meraldia Tape from Grassroots Educare Trust can speak more to that as well. Funding for learning materials and resources, 11%. I think that would also come up today. Increasing community awareness and engagement in ECD, I think goes to the heart of improving ECD access and quality and tapping into government subsidies and systems, which we'll see coming out today. So thank you for that. My colleague Abdullah will share those results with you now. But let's go through the context and let's look at, to understand and locate today's conversation. ECD in South Africa is pivotal for reducing educational inequality and fostering socioeconomic growth. But in our struggling society with high levels of unemployment and poverty, many children simply just don't have access to good quality early learning programs on a consistent basis. And if you see from that slide, around 60% of children between the ages of 0 and 5 have little to no access, exposure to early learning programs, according to South Africa's 2030 strategy for ECD programs, which is a key document out of the Department of Basic Education as well. And if you've seen, and I'm sure we'll have reference to it, and we'll make sure to share it at some stage as well, the Heckman curve. This was developed by Professor Joseph Heckman, and he shows that the highest rate of economic returns comes from the earliest investments in children. So if you look at the education life cycle, definitely, shows the importance of focusing on ECD. And earlier this week at that breakfast that I'd mentioned, sponsored by held by Oppenheimer Memorial Trust and Investec, Basic Education Minister Siviwe Khwarube, spoke on refocusing on ECD as a way to drive improvements throughout the full education journey of a child. And I think another important statistics to have come out of the research is that this is from the DBE's 2021 ECD census, shows that 40% of early learning programs are run from residential homes, while almost half of all ELPs are not registered. And I think that shows the importance of focusing on ECD and really strengthening the sector. Now, if we look at CSI support for early childhood development, this comes from our latest research out of the 2024 Business and Society Handbook. Education as a broader sector continues to be the most supported by businesses. You had 92% of the companies surveyed supporting education. This is up significantly from 78% in 2023. And then around 45% of average CSI expenditure was invested in education. So that just shows you the commitment and the importance, I think, that we all realize education needs to receive. And then when we drill down to the levels of education, the research shows that 31% of average CSI spend on education went to early childhood development. And I think that's really key and already shows the commitment that is in, coming from both corporates and NPOs as well. And if we look at the types of interventions, we see a fracturing of that spending, I think indicating both the extent of the challenges in education, as well as the different strategies and focus areas. And I think for me, it begs the question, are we harnessing spend in the most effective ways to improve the impact of corporate interventions? And hopefully we'll be able to dig into that question today and come up with ideas. I don't think there's a simple answer to it at all. I would now like to introduce the panelists for today. Nomsa Mutapuli, the ECD and Youth Fund Manager at the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust. Yaneli Kotze, the Acting Director, Early Childhood Development in the Department of Basic Education, Dr. Vuyelwa Nhlapo, CEO of the Ashupol Community Trust, and Mareldia Tape, the Chairperson of the Grassroots Educare. I'll now turn to them, and let me start with you, Nomsa. Thank you so much to all of you for sharing your time and expertise with us today. So I'll start with you, Nomsa. If we look at the OMT's work, what strategic priorities does the OMT have for supporting ECD in South Africa?
Thank you so much, Sheldon, and good morning, everyone. So maybe just a bit of background. A few years ago, the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust did a strategy review where, we really wanted to see the direction that the organization was going, given the context of, the function shift from social development to Department of Basic Education. And with the work that was done with that review, we realized that while we've been supporting very good organizations that do great work in the sector, the work was often quite deep and extensive, but and localized, but not really reaching, as many children as possible. So the aim of universal access wasn't quite something that we were getting to. And so based on the research the education research that we conducted, we then decided that there was a need to shift and work on, initiatives that were systemic, that were catalytic, and would also support scale. And that led us to 3 focus areas with our ECD strategy. So the first one is systems change. And here it's really about how we can support an enabling environment for the sector and for children to be able to thrive. This includes supporting initiatives that help to direct or increase funding towards ECD, the adoption of standardized tools and ways of working within the sector just to streamline, how even implementation actually happens within the sector, and really just help with becoming more data-driven. And, if we all working towards the same thing and we're using standardized tools, then that means, we're able to collect information about what we're doing and the impact thereof. The second focus area is around increasing access to quality early learning. And that covers, things that supporting registration of ECD programs. It includes obviously expanding access, supporting initiatives that expand access to ECD, as well as sustainability, improving skills. I saw that was a major one in terms of the outcomes of the poll that you did now. But yeah, so also increasing skills and qualifications in order to obviously make sure that our children then thrive by 5. And then the last one is around, how we can get more youth to actually participate in the ECD sector. We've got high unemployment rates in South Africa, but at the same time, we've got a huge access gap. And so this could be solved by getting more youth involved in the sector. And so finding ways and initiatives that actually attract youth, and also, it's not just about attracting youth, but also ensuring that we're improving, the sustainability of the sector so that youth can be attracted and actually stay within the sector as well. And I think ultimately, really what we're trying to achieve is also just align to, the DBE ECD strategy, the 2030 strategy, right? And make sure that the work that we do is actually helping to shift the needle and helping the DBE in achieving its initiatives, which is about, all the things I've managed around, universal access and so forth. And so it's about how can we then align the work that we do to ensure that the country moves forward, that the initiatives are not hindering, but actually enabling the work that the department wants to do as well.
Okay, thanks so much, Nomsa. Yaneli, if I can now turn to you, and the government's perspective and involvement on this. How's the Department of Basic Education addressing the challenges of ECD accessibility and quality. And I suppose we'll get to how companies can best support the plans, but if we just focus now on how DBE is addressing those challenges of access and quality.
Excellent, thank you, and good morning from my end as well. I think it's always helpful to just reflect on where we started. In 2019, the president had the State of the Nation address that I think surprised us pleasantly, all of us, to say that there's going to be this function shift. And at that point, we didn't know what the size and shape of the sector was. We had no data, there was no data systems, there was no information. So building an evidence-based sector was just not possible. So in that first couple of years, we spent a lot of effort on the ECD census, the Thrive by 5, the Lego deep dive study, the public expenditure institution review, to understand all the elements of the sector. Where are ECD programs? How many are they? Where are they situated? How many children are they serving? What's the quality that's being produced by this? What is the quality of curriculum implementation? And how does public spending work? And using all of that information, we then went through a period of a really deep analysis and really understanding what's the root causes of a lot of the challenges that we're seeing in the sector. And all of that culminated into last year, the launch of the 2030 strategy, to say now we've got an evidence base to help us develop a system. And it's one of the things the minister mentioned on Monday that I found so profound, where she said, we can't build a system on interventions. That's not a system. And I think that is exactly the approach we took to this 2030 strategies. To say we need to build a system so that we can have universal access to quality ECD programs so that all children in South Africa can thrive by 5, because we know if they thrive by 5, they're much more likely to be able to read for meaning by age 10. We'll get to the matric results and have a lot more quality bachelor's passes, and we'll have economically productive citizens. And that is how we developed the strategy, to really think how can we achieve this very audacious goal that we're trying to achieve. And last year we launched the strategy, and the strategy is built on this concept of a social compact, to say it is an audacious goal. If we want to achieve universal access by 2030, it means all of us need to step up. Government, we need to step up, but we need the sector to step up. We need donors and funders to step up, because we all truly believe that setting up our children for future and for successful futures to the benefit of all of us as a society. And that is where the social compact started. And as Nomsa said, the social compact really kickstarted with the Bana Pele mass registration drive last year. And I think over the year we've experienced the power of collaboration, of working together, of having multiple people in the sector with various different technical skills coming on board and helping us crack a really hard nut to crack. And we've seen that successfully play out. We're very excited for this year and seeing this pipeline really running and seeing many more ECD programs coming to the net. And the reason we started with registration is because that is the first binding constraint we need to unlock in the sector if we want to increase access, because it is helping us to understand where are our programs, how many children are they serving, but then more importantly, where's the gap? And we really want to identify the most vulnerable communities and help them to strategically drive and expand access in those communities. But it's also going to help us improve access, because now we know where programs are, we know what their conditions are, and we can systematically start building up quality. And that is what we're moving towards in the following years to come. We've been working on, in collaboration with a wide range of partners, on developing daily activity plans and integrated learning and teaching support materials so that we can really capacitate and enable our ECD practitioners to take the national curriculum framework and implement it in a high quality way. We're busy with a whole range of other stakeholders on cracking this challenge of how do we develop achievable and attainable professional pathway for our ECD practitioners, really taking into consideration their contextual binding constraints. We've got the quality assurance and support system that we're building to say, how do we, once we've got ECD programs registered, build a whole system of progressively and in a developmental approach, enabling and supporting our ECD programs to reach those quality standards that we want for them as a society. And that all of this will be tested in the Education Outcomes Fund, the results-based financing initiative that we're launching later this year, to say we need to do blended finance. So how can we leverage government funding and contribute and get blended finance from the sector, but then in a collaborative and strategic way, use that to co-fund implementing partners to help us expand access and improve quality in these ECD programs. And I think these are just some of the initiatives that we've brought on board to say, how do we reach this very audacious goal of universal access to quality ECD?
Thank you so much, Yanli. And Yanli reminding me that the breakfast wasn't on Tuesday, as I said earlier. It was actually on Monday. A lot has happened clearly in this week. And thank you to the questions we've already got through. Patrick, Yolanda, Sandy, thank you very much. Please keep them coming. Gil, thank you. Please send them in, and we'll be able to pose those and ask those questions to our panelists. I see we've got a couple of hands up. Just a reminder that the best way to answer and only way to ask questions is through the Q&A box there. We won't be taking any voice questions, but you can still contribute through the questions to the Q&A box there. I'd now like to turn to Dr. Nhlapo, the CEO of Assupol's Community Trust. Dr. Nhlapo, how does your company's investment in ECD align with its broader corporate social responsibility and sustainability goals? What's the Trust's ECD strategy?
Thank you, Sheldon, and good morning, everyone. As Assupol, we have a very long history of engaging with communities we serve. And we believe, as Assupol, that our purpose is to serve. And that purpose drives us to make a difference by empowering and uplifting communities in areas where Assupol Life has a footprint. We also want to be recognized as a caring and responsible corporate citizen that promotes good governance, partnerships, and stakeholder relations. And it is for this reason that Assupol Community Trust aims at supporting the South African government in attaining its goal of ensuring universal access to quality early childhood development. So our strategy basically is founded on various pillars, and I'll just mention these pillars. First of all, we focus on improving the skills of the practitioners. And I heard earlier on even our Yaneli also mentioning the importance of the skills. And it's quite interesting that we've got a high number of attendees today citing the importance of improving skills. We do this for both the practitioners that are in center-based and non-center-based early childhood development. We also support ECD centers with information that can assist them in terms of complying with regulatory framework. And as we would know that the biggest challenge, particularly in ensuring that ECD centers are registered, is the issue of infrastructure. So we focus basically on infrastructure development. And by the way, our biggest budget at Assupol Community Trust goes to infrastructure development. We also provide learning material through various toy libraries that we have in each of the areas that we support. We have toy libraries, and we ensure that children can be able to access learning material through these toy libraries. We also provide nutrition for children, in particular those that are coming from poor communities, because we believe no hungry child can be able to learn. But importantly, Assupol Community Trust is intentional in its strategy in ensuring that children with disabilities are not left behind, and they also access quality early childhood development. And as indicated by Yaneli once more, we build partnerships, we believe in collaborations with all levels of government, and ensure that we can be able to realize the outcomes of early childhood development. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nhlapo. Meraldia, you as the chairperson of Grassroots, how is Grassroots Educare Trust addressing the challenges faced by ECD providers, particularly in underserved areas? Do we have Meraldia with us? We may have a technical...
You just hold on. Hi there, Sheldon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can.
Okay. Good morning, panelists. Good morning, participants. Thank you for this opportunity to be able to be part of this panel discussion. Just a correction. I am not the chairperson of Grassroots. I am the director of Grassroots Educare Trust. I must check in every time if you can hear me. Our Wi-Fi is playing up. Sheldon, can you just put that question through again?
Sure. Apologies on the
Thank you.
Sheldon there. Yes, can you hear me, Meraldia?
I can hear you now.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
I can hear you.
Perfect. Tell me, how is Grassroots addressing the challenges faced by ECD providers, particularly in underserved areas?
Okay, thank you very much. You must just check in with me whether you can hear me, Sheldon. Grassroots is an... Hold on for a minute. It's playing up again. Grassroots is a non-profit organization, a 52-year-old accredited organization. We are an award holder of the ETDP CETA, and we are a community development and training organization. At present, we are working with approximately 3,000 preschools in the Western Cape, assisting the Western Cape Education Department to ensure that these preschools get registered, or if they are registered, they need to get re-registered. And through that, we need to use our registered programs to facilitate the teachers, principals, and governing bodies. So we have what we call the site learning program, which addresses the classroom implementation of a quality program, which is also running together with the NCF document. Then we also do the playgroup site learning program. And I saw earlier on that 60% of our children are in schools. So 40% of our children is out of any form of early childhood development. So what do we do there as Grassroots? We develop playgroups and we work on farms, cities, towns, and all of that. We develop playgroups, leaders who can then work with children in a safe space, up to 10 or 12 children. Through that progress in terms of using playgroup site learning program, where the playgroup leader works with those children in a safe space. Grassroots can give support, mentoring, and coaching on site with all our training. Then there's something that I didn't hear you talking about, Sheldon, and that is the governance of all our preschools. So if we have approximately 5,000 preschools in the Western Cape province alone, those preschools must have governing bodies that manages and support their preschools. So in comes Grassroots with governance and financial training, and we do on-site training through that, where we do job descriptions, we develop policies, we develop business plans, we do budgets, we do proposals, we do reports. And that is very, very much practical, 70% practical, 30% theoretical, and financial needs which allows us to go on site to give that classroom support. Then we also do parent involvement training. This is the beginning where we say the parents are the first educators of the children. So how do we get them involved in early childhood development? We need to bring the consciousness about of the roles that parents must play in support of their children who are in play groups or in ECD centers. Then we also have what we're saying, and we've got a lot of challenges that we need to share with you in terms of where can CSI invest in. We're saying that recommendations like invest in a registered learning program, invest in skilling and upskilling teachers, invest in governing bodies in their training and so forth, financial training, invest in parent involvement workshops, invest in grade R workshops of our children, and I'm guessing here, 80% of our children is still sitting in community preschools. What happens to that grade R teachers where the teachers in themselves haven't been trained on the CAPS and so forth? We need to look at that. Then we also need to look at what's currently happening in the Banapele program when it comes to the e-care system. There also we found that because we're working with our 3,000 schools here in the Western Cape, we have a lot of challenges in the Banapele, and we can share that as we go along. Then also what we need to look at and what CSI can look at is to look at the legacy of NQF level 4 has currently come to an end last year in June. How do we make sure that our preschools have at least some of the teachers trained on the level 4 when it comes to the new QCTO? Many of ourselves are still registered to be able to train. Grassroots in itself have trained hundreds of learners on the legacy program, and we're about to train on the QCTO. So investment in the learnership for teachers, when we say enhance their ability to be able to work with our children. And then also what is important is to use our measuring tools. For grassroots, it is the ELOM tool and our very own assessment for school beginners tool, which we call the ASB tool. It monitors our programs. It monitors the teacher or the parent as playgroup mentors. It monitors the children. Then also we have a program which is geared to the 0 to 3, and that is babies and toddlers. And our programs comes a long way, and it is registered with the education department. And I will stop here for a while, Sheldon, and hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mereldia. Okay, so really a lot to unpack, a lot of good work, being done across the board by OMT, DBE, corporates like ASUPOL, and then obviously NPOs such as Grassroots. If I could just ask my panelists to turn their cameras and their mics on for the discussion section of the webinar. Yanli, I want to start with you just to, we've spoken and there's been reference made to the Banapele ECD registration drive, but I think it's helpful to explain what the drive is and what it encompasses and aims to achieve.
Yes, excellent. And I think it's always helpful to understand why it's needed. And I think the biggest reason we need or we believe that Banapele is one of our most critical projects at this point is that we cannot speak increasing access if we don't know where access is and where access is not, and which children are underserved. And that is the first key thing, is we know that it's a legislative responsibility for ECD programs to get registered. But as government, we also need to come to the party and say, how do we create an enabling process that's accessible for ECD programs? And that is what we've really tried to do with Banapele, is how can we rethink the process, streamline it as much as possible, and get it at a point where the first step into the entry of the system is achievable, it can be done, and that there's a supportive process then throughout to help ECD programs become compliant. So that is what we've tried to achieve with the Banapele mass registration drive.
Now, Yanli, on that note, I think in terms of, it may seem obvious that organizations, involved in education and the care of children are registered, but what does it help the organizations achieve? And why has registration and compliance been notoriously difficult, especially in underserved areas?
So the slogan of our mass registration drive, Banapele, means putting children first. And that is the heart of what we're doing, is to say we want all our children to have access to safe spaces that's conducive to learning. And that is the intention of registration, is to ensure that our children are safe. And that's what we want all ECD programs to provide, but we recognize that the process have been really onerous historically. We know the norms and standards have been difficult to be attained, and that's why we recognize you have to have an end-to-end process where the first step is attainable, so that we know where programs are, we know what their needs are, and we can then develop a supportive process on top of that to help them achieve those norms and standards. Yeah, Sheldon, I hope feels to me there was a second part to the question that I'm forgetting now.
Just in terms of so there's the first part in terms of helping them register, which I think you've answered. But what does registration help them unlock?
Exactly.
And ultimately, as you said, back to helping the children.
And I think there's two unlocks. I think the first unlock is that now that ECD programs can register at bronze, it enables them to be viable or eligible for certain infrastructure funding pots. For instance, I think one example is we know that the National Lotteries Foundation is a big funder of ECD infrastructure, but many funders and many organizations want ECD programs to be conditionally registered or recognized by government before they fund them. And that is why this bronze registration, or the first registration part, is so important, because it really enables us as government to help and support on an infrastructure fund, but also many other organizations that want that legitimacy. The second one is that if ECD programs get to silver registration, it unlocks their ability to apply for the ECD subsidy. Now, we recognize there's many constraints on the funding side as well, and we're busy solving that problem. But in the meantime, we need to make sure that when we get more funding, we can spend that funding, and we can only spend it if ECD programs are registered at a silver level. And that's why we realize we need to unlock this and get ECD programs eligible to at least receive the subsidy, while we're figuring out the second part of the challenge as well.
Okay. Nomsa, I want to turn to you here, because I think there's the registration part that happens, and I think there's obviously a lot of communication and advocacy and around that's needed. But once the companies, once the ECDs are registered, there's a second component, and I think this is where the funding comes in. What are the two legs of funding that the Banapele registration drive, and OMT as well, are focusing on, and how corporates can get involved in that?
Yeah, so I think one thing that we've realized over the years is that, sometimes there is a lot of good work, as I said initially, that is happening, but often happening in silos, not coordinated. And the opportunity that the Banapele Drive brings now is to have kind of one focused program around supporting registration, and that allows us to actually have visibility on, as Anneli said, who are these ECD programs, where are they located, what do they need for them to comply. And so the ECAS system provides us that kind of view of what is actually happening in the sector and the need for registration. And then what that does then is, as these programs register, we're able to do almost a needs assessment on them. Once they've hit bronze, to understand, where they are in terms of compliance with silver or gold. So we can then understand, are there gaps in terms of health and safety? Like, do they have any, for example, first aid material and infrastructure as well? Are there any issues there? Is there fencing issues or whatever? Anything that has to do with compliance around health and safety and infrastructure. So we're able to do that needs assessment with these programs because we have visibility of who they are and where they are. And so with that, the intention is to have a centralized fund that then has a very coordinated way of actually supporting these programs with registration support. What that then looks like is that once they're on ECAS, the needs assessment has been done. We know where they are. They can be prioritized based on, income levels in those districts that they're located and so on. And so we're able to then prioritize them and say, these are the programs that actually need support. And with the centralized fund, then that money is actually coordinated in terms of where it goes, and what it actually enables and unlocks. And then it can actually streamline again with the Banabele process and working with social workers in those particular districts to say, well, we've supported these sites to be compliant. Now you can go and do, a registration visit and see, and hopefully they then get registered and become eligible for the subsidy, as Anneli mentioned. And so, the whole idea is to make sure that we work together as both philanthropy and CSI to build this fund. And the idea is that with this fund as well, we know that the need is not only for just now the Banabele mass registration drive within this year, but in order to get to universal access for all children, it means that new programs will come on board. It means that those programs as well, based on where they're likely to be located because of where the access gap is, they will also need support. And so we have a mechanism now to actually kind of build a good showcase of how we can, as corporate South Africa, actually rally together and work at scale in a coordinated way, and hopefully make it something that is built into the future as we work towards universal access.
Thanks so much, Nomsa, and thank you for all the questions coming through. There really are really strong questions coming through, and I'll pose those to our panelists as we proceed. So thank you for that. Keep them coming, and I will start getting to those as we broaden the discussion on that front. Mereldia, obviously looking at Janely mentioned the registration drive, what some of the problems have been. So while you look at obviously educator training, and the training that's provided, but in terms of the other support functions, we've got questions here around, what type of training is given to educators or the leaders of ELP, of early learning programs, to have, really strong running of their operations and being able to, ensure that they're registered, being able to ensure that, they're tapping into the right subsidies so that they're effective on that front. Mereldia, can you hear us? Seems she's having technical. Let me move to Dr. Nhlapo in the meantime while we get Mereldia back online. Dr. Nhlapo, when you look at it from a corporate perspective, and obviously seeing a drive like the Banabele drive, the and how corporates can play a part in that. From the corporate perspective, from your perspective, what is how do you get on board a program like this and ensure that it aligns to your strategies?
Thank you very much. I think let me start by indicating that as Ashopol Community Trust, there are various aspects that really motivated us to invest in early childhood development. And when we look at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, they have raised the importance of tackling educational inequality through the Sustainable Development Goal number 4 specifically. And we do know that ECD is a catalyst for addressing important developmental challenges, especially for the most marginalized in society. So early childhood development can directly impact on socioeconomic development, as well as the eradication of multidimensional poverty, inequality, and unemployment. And these are the triple challenges that face South Africa as they are expressed in the National Development Plan. So early childhood development therefore is important to address these very aspects. And we are listening to what is coming from government in terms of driving early childhood development. And as Ashopol Community Trust, our programs are there in supporting government in its initiative and ensure that we realize the 2030 vision of ensuring that children have universal access to quality early childhood development.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nhlapo. Meraldia, I see we've got you back. That's really great. From an ECD provider, educator perspective, what sort of training goes into, there's obviously the primary care, the care that they give children, but often these are small operations run by the educators or, run by a very small team. What sort of support is there that's being given to help them, for instance, in running their operations, in making sure that they have the right understanding with registration, being able to tap into the right subsidies?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. If you can hear me. What Grassroots does is, in terms of a learning program, whether you are a small ECD center, whether you are a playgroup, we deliver training on the site learning program, which is based on the NCF document and covers all the elders, all the 6 elders. That is a 20-day training program. We train it weekly, 5 days. You go out, you implement, you come back until the 20 days are done. That is for the ECD teachers who works with children 3 to 5-year-olds. Then we have a registered program, which is called the Babies and Toddlers Program. It is a 20-day program, also registered with the Education Department, which is also based on the NCF document, where we train you on how to work with children 0 to 3-year-olds. Then we have the Playgroup Site Learning Program. That is geared to the children who are finding themselves outside the loop of early childhood development. Those children who are still running around in the streets, standing at the risk of being abused, and of whose parents cannot pay fees to get them into a preschool. So what happens in the playgroup program itself, when we train and establish through our community development interventions, and we establish playgroups, those playgroup leaders takes care of children, 6 to 10 children, it could go up to 12, where they then support those unemployed parents and makes it possible for those parents who go and find work. Very often those parents find work in maybe a child job for a day. And what happens with those money is that they then can feed their families. They can support their own families. They make a small contribution to the playgroup. And in grassroots case, we are working with more than 300 playgroups. Some of our playgroups are supported by the EPWP project, where the playgroup leader then receive a stipend and the playgroup for themselves, and the playgroup leader also receive about approximately R4 per day per child to have that child in the playgroup. That is part of our training. And then we come to the governance of the preschools. We have what we call governance finance training. Very often, the ECD centers do not have a workable governing body. So we venture in there, we train them, we do the policies, we relook at the constitutions, and it's all hands-on budgeting, proposal writing, report writing. So when they leave this training, where we offer them, it's hand-on, they will leave with a proposal. They will leave with the expertise and experience on how to write a report. Many of the centers are receiving subsidy. So how do they report to the education department of what they've done with that subsidy? How do they, at the end of financial year, come out with a small profit, which you can carry over into the next year? So those are all the kind of things in terms of training. We also train the levels training, level 4 and level 5, which as a non-profit organization, we are seeking funding to assist learners to access and acquire that qualification. Is there any other question, Sheldon?
Thanks for that, Merel. Yes, of course.
Sheldon, can I just say, on the registration project, where we're working with 3,000 schools, we venture in there and we were a close partner with the education department on the Banapele registration project. But where we find it very difficult and challenging is that even though we did the Banapele registration, there is limitation and challenges when we talk deep rural. Deep rural people have technical barriers. They can't operate their cell phones. They don't have data. They don't have airtime. They don't have Wi-Fi. So it also means that a verifier needs to go out to verify and to assist them on site. And this is for the CSI maybe to think of how can we as NGOs play that role and be financially supported to go out to the deep rural areas where we work and help those people get onto the Banapele. Because if the data comes out, the data will be skewed because we wouldn't have captured the very deep rural people. So there's also a delay in feedback. Facilities that are successfully registered are still waiting on feedback.
It looks like we have Mereldia's connection has stalled there. Let me get to some of the questions, and I think that's really valuable insight. I see Moratue, I know you're out of run an ECD in Bram Fisher, maybe out of grassroots area, but some indications on the help ECDs can get. I see there's also mention in the comment section, thanks, Colleen Walter, saying safe and sound trains and mentors, many ECD centers in contexts. We've in various contexts of registration. So there are options available, Moratua. I want to get, but we lost you for a bit there, Mereldia, but we'll come back to that. I mean, there's quite a bit to unpack here. Yanli, I want to come back to you because there have been quite a few questions around inclusivity, around ECDs being able to cater for children with disabilities, children living with special needs. Obviously, those critical care often take unique teaching skills, as we know. What is DBE's focus on ensuring that ECDs are inclusive, to ensure that children, especially those, as I'd mentioned, living with special needs, living with disabilities, especially in poorer areas where their parents may not have the necessary means to send them to special ECD centers? How are they, how are we ensuring universal access for them as part of, the ECD offering?
No, absolutely. And that is one of our key cross-cutting themes in all the projects that we're doing. Recognizing the importance of inclusivity, but also the importance of this age group, that the 3 to 5-year-old age group is such a unique time to do the early identification of any learning barriers. And there's that unique age group where you can still do interventions that can prevent a lot of learning delays later on in life. So again, we're taking a systemic approach to this to say, how can we, in each and every program that we're running or developing, and each and every system we're developing, we have that inclusivity lens in it. So multiple things are happening in terms of this. Firstly, we're busy revising White Paper 6 to say, how can we, from a legislative perspective, have strong inclusivity in early childhood development as well. Developing screening tools so that we can really equip our ECD practitioners on how can they pick up and do that early identification. Developing with the Department of Health referral systems to say, how do we, once the ECD practitioner has picked up that there's a potential delay or potential problem, have the connections she can do to get the required specialist into support. But then similarly, in everything that we're doing, for instance, the daily activity plans that we developed, how do we enable and equip our ECD practitioners to adapt their activities in a way that it is inclusive and appropriate for children with different learning abilities. So it's not a one-pronged approach. It's again building a system that we need to really support our practitioner, to support the child and their family, to really provide them with that access.
Okay. Dr. Nhlapo, from a corporate perspective, and we've got a comment here from Warren Farrer from the Do More Foundation, really, receiving good feedback as well, talking around the supporting ECD centers, which are largely women-led small businesses, be powerful. Apologies, I've just lost my place with all the questions coming in, so thank you for that. But it's about supporting, as I'd mentioned, the ECDs, often women-led on that front as well. So not just looking at cash donations, how do you go from a corporate in terms of other smaller in-kind, possibly support for business development, possibly out of enterprise development as well, and then the other impact areas, because none of this happens in silos, right? There's GBV, there's poverty, and the like. So how do you think about it as a corporate in terms of a total package of support for ECDs and obviously the people and often women running them? You're on mute, Dr. Nhlapo. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you very much. In Ashopol Community Trust, I must just mention that our funding approach is quite different. Actually, we don't give cash at all to all the ECD centers that we support. What we do, we have a process where we conducted just to have a clear understanding of the data of the communities within which we operate. And we conducted an audit to understand the extent of access to early childhood development, as well as ECD centers that were not registered. And through that data, we were then able to say, this is how we will focus in terms of the areas where we would support the ECD centers in terms of the support they need towards compliance, towards registration. And we understand that there are challenges of unemployment. We understand the challenges of inequality and poverty. And therefore, our approach also is encouraging those young women that are within these ECD centers to ensure that they get employment. But also ensuring that we address all the areas. We've crafted a service delivery model, actually, that guides us in terms of step by step, how do we support these ECD centers. Those that are interested in the service delivery model can look at our website, you can see that. But once we have identified an ECD, we have a multi-stakeholder approach where we sit together, particularly working very closely with the environmental health practitioners to analyze and assess these ECD centers so that when we provide the support, we are sure that that support will enable those ECD centers to be registered and therefore be able to access funding from government and other institutions, because most of the organizations do not want to support ECDs that are not registered. And interestingly, from our side as Ashopol Community Trust, even if they are not registered, so that we can assist them to move up to get to registration. Because as I say, most organizations do not support ECD centers that are not registered. So really our approach, your question was around other than just funding, giving money. So in addition, we have ECD centers that we have supported that have been registered, but unfortunately could not be funded by government. And in those cases, as Ashopol Community Trust, we have intervened by paying stipends so that they can enable those ECD centers to be sustainable, to function, to start function before they even access funding from government. So we are also very much responsive in our nature in the way in which we assist ECD centers. We respond to the needs on the ground.
Thank you, Dr. Nhlapo. A question here from Tracy. Thank you, Tracy Webster from OMT. I think it's important, Nomsa, to talk about that, highlight that goal, that financial goal, not just because that's the money that's needed, but there's also a secondary approach, a stepped approach, because then that helps unlock more subsidies and more resources from government. So if you can just talk us through that. Nomsa, I think you're on mute.
There we go.
No worries. There we
There
go.
we go. Okay. Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, I mean, the intention is for corporate and philanthropy to really come together to work on the central fund, which is independent. We are in conversation with Development Bank South Africa to actually host the fund because they've got deep expertise around infrastructure support and so forth. And the idea, again, as I mentioned, is initially we want to fundraise 120 to 150 million to support the current mass registration drive up to the end of this year. And as I mentioned, we would like this fund to continue as we expand access to early learning. But yeah, so the idea is to really have a proper mechanism for one, getting funding into a centralized fund, but also two, having a clear process of governance, but also implementation in terms of who needs support, matching that support with the funding that we've received, working with implementers on the ground to actually execute on that, whether it's health and safety or infrastructure. So it's about really enhancing the social compact that is already emerged, and using the ecosystem in ECD that already exists, and making sure that, you know, all the role players come in with their strengths to really help us to get the mass registration drive working at scale, and in a way that provides comfort around, you know, for all involved around what the money is being used for, where it's going, and ultimately unlocking these subsidies that Janet has been talking about. And I think, you know, an important thing as well to note is as we create these or as we support these programs to register, Yaneli mentioned that there are constraints in terms of budgets for the per child per day subsidy. But what we're doing, what we'll be basically creating a pipeline, right? That Treasury can't ignore, because now we will have all of these programs waiting in line to be supported, and therefore it means you know, it's kind of almost forcing Treasury to see that there is a need, and there are eligible programs that need support, and that funding has to be created and directed to that. Yeah, and so that's kind of also the hope here, in that, one, we do know that there's already 139 million that's earmarked for subsidies for the upcoming financial year. But at the same time, it's about creating that pipeline and creating that pressure so that more funding can be unlocked.
Nomsa, thanks. And I think you've spoken there to, you know, how the funding will be managed. I know that there are some numbers around, for instance, on the infrastructure leg of the financing. There's some numbers in broad range of how much is needed per early learning ECD center. Yes. Often with these being home run, or the initial, you know, as we saw from the context there, a lot of them are home run. And then adding on the layer of the questions we had around children with special needs, often you'll need different type of infrastructure, possibly even different material to ensure both safety and obviously quality learning as well. Have those, and I don't want to call them exceptions, but in terms of the broad range, have those added infrastructure costs or needs been factored in to ensure, you know, all ECD centers are you know, get the type of upgrades that they need to be fit for purpose?
Yeah, so I mean, as you mentioned, obviously ECD provision currently is in different contexts, right? There's home and community based, and then there's brick and mortar, you know, kind of special build ECD centers. And so the beauty of the process that we built with the Bandabele drive, as I mentioned, is that we're able to do a needs assessment in terms of what is required for compliance, right? And in addition to that, the implementing partners would be able to go in and actually see what is required in order to have a safe space for the children that are attending those entities. And so based on that, we're able to then understand what the need is and what the quantum to enable that is, and then be able to, with the funds that are raised, to actually support that. We've done work, and particularly ILIFA as well, around what type of or kind of the range in terms of, when you talk about infrastructure, the range of needs, right? And I mean, it ranges from anything like replacing a window to obviously extreme cases, a complete rebuild. But for structurally sound places, you know, it can range anything from 30,000 to 150,000. And so, yeah, so that's kind of from the infrastructure maintenance and upgrades that would be required. So not necessarily a complete build. We're not necessarily focusing on rebuilding or building new sites at the moment. And then we've also done a review of what is required within that space for health and safety requirements. And I've actually costed this line item by line item, including estimates around the warehousing, from procurement all the way to actually delivering to the site. And that has been estimated to about just under 12,000 per site. And so those are the numbers that we're looking at. And so if we're starting with 5,000 sites to support initially, we'll need about 58 million for health and safety packs. So as I mentioned, these are the soft infrastructure. So your first aid kits, your mattresses for the children, your containers to keep away, dangerous things or pack away medicine and so forth. And then the balance would then be to support your hard infrastructure upgrades, making sure that the cables and wiring is safe for the children and there's fencing and so forth. So those are kind of the ranges of things that are required.
Thank you, Nomsa. I want to now look at the teachers a bit and return to that. Maraldi, I'm going to come to you first before going to Yanli. So there's a question, and thank Jessica Blom, around the conditions that ECD practitioners, providers, caregivers work under. Often, especially in your poorer areas, underserved areas, often they're doing it for passion, doing it for very low wages. Or pay as well. The conditions, obviously, we know can be quite taxing. From your perspective, Merelda, what sort of support should or do those caregivers, those teachers, those providers need to ensure that they're in the best possible space and place to be able to deliver quality education?
Okay. Thank you, Sheldon. For a teacher to be able to do what the teacher needs to do, and that is to work with a number of children in a class. For number one, she needs to be a trained teacher. She needs to be skilled. She needs to have a learning program which she can implement, just to be able to work with a group of children. And I heard Yanni talking about inclusive education, special needs children. So when we also say special needs children, we don't often know whether that child is possibly hearing impaired, it's got a language barrier. That is all the kind of special needs that the teacher needs to be aware of. That is the invisible special needs that the teacher needs to be. So what I'm saying is, besides being skilled and have a qualification and be experienced and carry knowledge of the learning program which you will be implementing, how does a teacher work with about 20 to 30 children in her classroom? And here in comes where we train them to work in small groups. So you have what we give them, small group training through the site learning program. And to Jessica's question, can the teacher then cope in that environment if the teacher is untrained? So what we're saying is we need to instill that teacher to be able to do that. And how do we verify this? So when you come through training, any kind of training, at the end of the training, we ask you to do a theme table and to present your theme that you will, or your topic that you will be using for the week or for the month. Through that, we can see where you're struggling. And when we go out on site, and that is important, grassroots training are followed by site support, on-site support. So we give you support, monthly support. We go in there, we assist you in your classroom So whatever topic you are busy with the children, we help you there. So that is further skilling the teacher who are and who had gone through any kind of training, grassroots, that after sales service is hectically important. And I need for us as service provider organizations and as the education department look at how can we support teachers on site, which is important. They sometimes cannot internalize or put their theoretical knowledge into practicals on site. So that is where we step in. We come and help you on site. So Jessica, if that answers your question, thank you, Sheldon.
Thank you, Mereldia. And then, Yanni, to stay with that topic in terms of, teacher conditions, training, which I think we've touched on, but, the conditions, wages, especially, where the ECDs are operating in poorer areas where, parents themselves may be stretched to either pay fees or get their kids into the centers as well. What's being done to look at, how teachers get the support that they need, both from a training perspective, but also in terms of, the world of work that they work in and the different support structures that would enable them to deliver quality education?
Okay.
Yeah, Sheldon, you can unpack that question from a whole lot of different angles as well. But I think specifically what we've been seeing, and this is not only in South Africa, we're seeing this internationally, just the power of that on-site support that Mereldia also spoke about. Just most ECD programs that deliver training programs that also include a coaching, mentoring element, ongoing on-site support are the support programs that have seen sustained behavioral change in our ECD practitioners, sustaining their improved quality in the way that they deliver the programs. And that is the importance of resource and training organizations in South Africa, is that they play a critical role in training our practitioners, but specifically also providing that on-site support. And that is at the heart of our service delivery model that we've positioned or put forward in the 2030 strategy, is how can government strategically partner with resource and training organizations to provide that ongoing training and upskilling and support of our practitioners. Because I think we need to be acutely aware of the very tough conditions in which our ECD practitioners are delivering such a beautiful job every day, loving our children, caring for them. And we need to come along them and support them and upskill them. And yes, there's financial constraints that we need to bear in mind, but often providing that emotional support that they require, given the complexity of the situations they deal with, is also really important and valuable. And again, that's why this Education Outcomes Fund project is so, I think, close to our hearts, and we're so excited about it, because it is a way in which we can, for the first time as government, say, how can we come and strategically support this resource and training organizations so that they can play this really important role to ECD practitioners, but importantly so that we track the outcomes that's achieved. So it's not just support, but it's really ensuring that the support we're providing leads to increased access, improved quality, and importantly, improved child outcomes. But we know that funding in ECD is deeply constrained, and the conversations we've been having with Treasury is to develop a financing strategy to really help us as government to say, how do we cover the operational cost of an ECD program? So the subsidy, how do we increase access to the subsidy, increase the value of the subsidy? But we recognize that that is only there to cover the operational cost. A lot of funding is still required in terms of the investment needed for increasing access and that investment in improving quality. And that is our mechanism that we're testing now. So how can we have blended finance with blended outcomes to ensure that we get to that goal that we really want to see?
We've almost run out of time. It really has flown by. And thank you for all the questions. Thank you for all the interaction. Yanli, I just want to stay with you quickly, and I think it's one you could address quickly as well. Patrick Motsepe, thank you for your contributions today. He's got a question around, is it not possible for the department or the CETA to come up with a common, uniform, seamless training curriculum for the ECD sector for teachers, practitioners, staff, other relevant stakeholders, including parents? We heard Meraldia speaking about the importance of parents earlier. Is there something like that in place, Yanli?
So we've got the National Curriculum Framework, which is guiding our ECD practitioners on how they need to implement or what we expect of them. What we are building on top of that is to say, almost again multi-layered, is to say the daily activity plans will give them guidance on how to do it, but we really want to build quality standards. Our role as basic education is one of being the quality assured, to say this is the standards that's expected of an ECD program. And linked to that, what we are doing with the sector, so the South African South African Council of Educators, the QCTO, ETDP, CETA, SAQA, and the work is to say, well, let's develop a professional endorsement framework as well, where again, we start thinking through what professional standards look like. And once those structures are in place, we can start thinking through, okay, so given this, how should training programs look? How do we think through the key elements that's needed? So we're putting in place the structures that will enable something like that later on.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Before we do wrap up and come to the final closing comments, we'll put up the third poll, which I think should stimulate our thinking. And I know in the earlier polls, in something like, in an area with as much complexity and with as much that we need to be doing, you almost want to tick all. But I think what we're trying to do is to really get us thinking around what's the one or two things that we think we can do that will move the needle, in the absence of doing everything, which obviously isn't possible. So this one, the third poll, is how should CSI balance short-term visible outcomes with long-term systemic changes in ECD? And, we've obviously seen the research around the long-term impacts that ECD and powerful ECD can have. So those votes coming through. Thank you so much as they come through. I'll just put one final question before we go to the roundups to Dr. Nhlapo. A question around, if we're looking at impact at scale, how do corporates and CEOs of foundations, how do we leverage the influence that you have to bring other corporates on board so that we are able to, combine resources, whether it be financial, whether it be in kind, whether it be, skills, to really have impact at scale with, which something like the Banapili drive is trying to achieve? Doctor, I think you're on mute.
Okay.
There we go.
Thank you very much. Earlier on, I indicated that one of our strategic thrusts is to build partnerships and collaborations with various, actors in the space of early childhood development. And we are very intentional about building partnerships. And if we look at the work that we have done as Ashokon Community Trust, you realize that part of it is through collaborations, working together and partnering with other corporates, partnering with government at different levels, provincial as well as local government level, but also working very closely with other nonprofit organizations. And we have realized, and as we are measuring the impact of our work, we can see the value and the contributions of partnerships and collaborations. And therefore, we believe very strongly that we need to join hands with all the sectors and make sure that we realize the goals of 2030.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nhlapo. I'd now like to turn to our closing comments, and thank you everyone for your questions and comments as they come through. This really has been an interactive and rich session, and so much more to unpack, but I think there's a lot to work with here. Nomsa, let me start with you. What's your one recommendation each for both companies and NPOs to consider in this mass registration drive?
Yeah, I think we've got a huge opportunity here to really streamline and do what we couldn't do in the past, or in the past what we managed to do in very small pockets. We've got now an opportunity to really do at scale in a very short period of time. And so it's about NGOs coming on board with the Panapeli Mass Registration Drive and supporting the ECD programs that are in their communities to really sign up on the platform, to support them with whatever registration requirements are there, just to make sure that they are they move forward along the registration process. And again, for CSI and philanthropy or corporate, it's about we've got an opportunity, as I said, to really, again, also streamline, to come together, to make our money go further, but by making sure that there's a consolidated and coordinated effort to make an impact in these ECD programs and really shift them into a place where they're now closer to sustainability. And making sure that we've got a long-lasting impact. And this really will, this is the first hurdle. We know that quality is also another issue that we need to address, but it is one big hurdle that we would have come over if we have managed to get all our unregistered sites into compliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Nomsa, and thank you so much for your time today. Janli, your one recommendation for NPOs and companies each?
I'm building on what the minister said on Monday, where she said we're now a government of national unity, and there's nothing more noble than to unite behind our children, Panapele, putting children first. And that is the invitation, is we all need to step up. We all need to play our part, and we all need to think bigger, large scale. How are we achieving this collectively, collaboratively, to the benefit of our children? So thank you.
Thank you so much, Janli. Dr. Nhlapo, your recommendation for NPOs and corporates?
The elephant is very big, and it requires to be eaten bit by bit. 2030 is around the corner, and therefore we need to accelerate improving access and ensure that our children have quality early childhood development. So let's work together, let's join hands. We can upscale this work if we are working together. Silos cannot achieve this huge task ahead of us.
Well, that's so key to that, working together. Thank you, Dr. Nhlapo there. And Mereldia, your one recommendation each for corporates and NPOs looking to support ECD registration and quality education.
Okay, thank you. We need to ensure that the facilitators that we use to deliver our training is of quality. So we need a qualified quality facilitator to do training. Then also with other organizations, for food security is in short supply at the ECD centers. So we partner with people and organizations like the Peninsula School Feeding, because we do believe children cannot learn on an empty stomach. And then also to address the 40% of children outside of the loop, we need to look at establishing play groups where children can be in the loop and get a proper development and training stimulation. Thank you.
Mereldia, thank you so much for that, and what a beautiful way to close us out. I want to thank all our panelists Nomsa Mutapuli, Yanli Kotze, Dr. Vuyelwa Nhlapo, and Mereldia Tape. Thank you so much for your time, your sharing your expertise with us this morning. Thank you to our attendees for staying with us just a touch over 11 o'clock, but I think it's really indicative of the interest in this, and possibly one that we need to revisit again later in the year, as we talk about issues of nutrition, as we talk about issues of quality, and getting an update, I think, would on the mass registration drive. I know there's some numbers around that already. There's a dashboard out of DBE, which is great. So thank you very much for everyone. Just a reminder that the full recording will be made available to those who registered, as well as a write-up of this as well. So you'll get all the valuable information that we've got here. You'll be able to share it with people in your organization and in your industries and networks. And really do keep sending us your, the work that you have and the impact that's being made this year. That's our theme this year at Trialogue, is really impact. How do we measure it? How do we see it coming about? And thank you for all your comments. Thank you for all the engagement. It really has been magnificent. Mark the last Thursday in February for our next online webinar. We'll be looking at trends in CSI for 2025, as we usually kick off the year, to help you plan your strategies, both as corporates and NPOs, and to really upscale the impact that we have in the development sectors. So thank you very much for joining us. Please do stay on the line for a brief survey. As I said, those are really important to helping us improve what we do and really tailor our topics for you and for your effectiveness. So thank you very much, and see you next month.